My name's Davida Shansky, and the title of this program is Live Without Limits, Reach Personal Success on a Daily Basis. Our purpose is to talk to you about personal development, psychology, mental health, behavioral styles, and various topics that affect you and keep you from reaching your maximum potential on a daily basis. And today's presentation is 7 popular TV and movie characters who showcase very narcissistic tendencies. Narcissism is a hot topic in the mental wellness space, and the sad truth is that we've probably all encountered a narcissist at some point or another. But here's another truth for you. It's also likely that we all show narcissistic tendencies on occasion. However, someone who is truly narcissistic will often ignore others' feelings and focus solely on their own. Narcissism can also be a personality trait or a larger personality disorder. And yes, this personality trait makes for great TV. So let's dig into a little deeper here. What well known characters show narcissistic tendencies? What exactly is narcissism? Well, what is narcissism? Narcissists are often born narcissists. Usually, their environment and experiences play a role in developing this personality trait. Signs of narcissism often include manipulative behavior, a sense of entitlement, a need for admiration and approval, a lack of empathy, arrogance, feeling of self importance. And I can tell you what it feels like to be raised by someone that's a narcissist and have a sister that's a narcissist, because I grew up with a disability at a time when there were no laws that guarantee people with disabilities rights. Therefore, at the time, there were no laws that guaranteed people with disabilities the right to an education or the right to employment. So what happened was that even though I was in the public school system, teachers didn't understand that I learned differently. And I grew up in a home that was very negative and very cruel. And so I was being bullied at school because I was the only one there with a disability. And I was being abused at home because I had a narcissistic mother. And I also have a narcissistic sister. And the two of them got along so great simply because they sat there and all they did was look at what other people have and criticize them and try to figure out how they can get a piece of what someone else had. And if you're noticing more than a few TV shows or movie characters stand out in your mind, this isn't a mistake. Having a narcissist in the mix can drive plot lines and make a show or a movie that much more dramatic. Movie and TV characters with narcissistic tendencies. As author Carla Grimes illustrates, a narcissist paints a picture of themselves as being the victim or innocent in all aspects. They will be offended by the truth, but what is done in the dark will come to light. Time has a way of showing people's true colors. So, what TV shows or movies have unveiled narcissistic characters? Without further delay, here's a list of 7 of them. Carrie Bradshaw. Surprisingly, even Sarah Jessica Parker agrees with this assessment. Carrie Bradshaw can frequently come off as self absorbed and as though the entire world revolves around her. Some even argue that Carrie switched from beloved heroine to raging narcissist somewhere in the midst of season 4. There's a change that happened where Carrie begins to make it all about her and becomes hurt when it isn't, or she isn't considered. In many ways, this is dubbed main character syndrome, but it's also straight up narcissism. For example, in season 4, Carrie blows all her money on shoes as opposed to using that money for previous commitments, and then gets mad when her friend won't bail her out. Carrie's career even revolves around talking about herself, and arguably, many claim she isn't the best of friends to her supposed best friends on the show. The me attitude. Just watch any episode of Sex and the City and a huge fault in their character. But we have to admit, it makes for great TV, despite how unrelatable it might come off. The Joker. Okay, this one's pretty obvious. Most notably, we can look at the Joker character in The Dark Knight. On top of being a complete psychopath, the Joker's narcissistic personality takes center stage, and he loves it. He has zero consciousness for what he does or for hurting others, but merely takes action for his own gains and agenda. I think we can all agree this is an accurate assessment. Professor Umbridge, here's one that all the Harry Potter fans out there, as one of the most perfect villains, Umbridge has serious narcissistic tendencies. She has a need to control every situation and lacks empathy for other characters, which never seems to make a turn for the better. When placed in an authoritative position, she also uses it for her own gains and desires. It's also clear that she seeks approval and admiration from others, often being the only one to give herself this. Regina George, Mean Girls is one of the most iconic chick flicks around. I can't even count how many times I've watched this movie. But if we watch carefully, Regina George displays some telltale signs of narcissistic behavior. For example, the commentary between Regina and Gretchen is a classic dance where the narcissist has their own codependent ally at the side pretty much constantly. And notice how Regina only receives candy grams. She doesn't give any out. It's clear that her world revolves around her and no one else. In fact, she does everything she can to maintain her status as the most popular or hot girl in the school. Then there's the fact that Regina is overly concerned with her physical appearance, making a key piece of her character. Perhaps in the end, she maybe learns from all of this, but the signs are all there. Don Draper, Mad Men. Okay, I'm a bit on the fence with this one too, considering there are many seasons of Mad Men. A lot of character development occurs, but I think we can all agree, especially at the beginning, that Don Draper tended to have feelings of grandiosity and a lack of empathy for those around him. We learn a lot about this character and his deeply rooted issues dating back to an abusive childhood. So, for the most part, we learn to develop a lot of compassion for Don. Chuck Bass and Gossip Girl. When we first introduced Chuck Bass and Gossip Girl, it's blindly obvious that he has tons of narcissistic character traits. As self-indulgent womanizer, he tends to spend the first few seasons doing whatever he pleases to get whatever he wants, while we do soften to Chuck a little bit when we realize he's actually capable of love and his family dynamic is less than ideal. The first few seasons have him playing the classic narcissist that keeps the plot line twisted and intriguing. Cersei Lannister, Game of Thrones. Cersei Lannister gave us the ultimate villain in Game of Thrones. And yes, sometimes she comes off as narcissistic, but at the same time, this narcissism extends from her prediction and pride in her family, House Lannister. Yet, again, we can't ignore her affair with her own brother, which produced less than stable offspring. Then there's the fact that almost every move Cersei makes is a plea for self-protection and an elevation of her own status, which lacks any empathy for others. And in many ways, she uses everyone around her to maintain or gain power, a true sign of a narcissist. It makes for great TV, but if we can learn anything from those characters, it's that we can always foster more empathy for others. We can do the opposite of what these villains have done. In turn, we can create a caring and uplifting world around us. Not one of these plays out like the unrealistic world of TV and movies. The idea here is that you need to recognize if you're showing narcissism and narcissistic tendencies, because it's the one of the best ways to cause you to lose relationships and lose the love of family members. Therefore, it's up to you to recognize and change your own behavior.